I'd like to call this meeting to order of Warrensville Town Council for Monday, August the 8th, 2022. Could we have a motion to approve the agenda and addendums, please, Councilor? Councilor Post, second by Councilor Andrews. All in favor? All right. Regarding disclosures of indirect or direct pecuniary interest, I was absent from the public meeting on July the 18th. Reason being, I'm the sole shareholder of Randall Realty, who is the applicant in this rezoning application. I have delivered a declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act to the clerk, and I'm declaring that for the previous meeting. Could we have a motion to move into close, please? Councilor Peters, second by Deputy Mayor McIntosh, all in favor? Thank you. We'll see you at the other link. Welcome to Town Council meeting for Monday, August the 8th, 2022. If we could start with the singing of our national anthem, Mr. Bonato.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you to David Nairn, the Artistic Director of Theatre Orangeville, for that rendition of our national anthem. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa of the Three Fires Confederacy. This meeting is being aired on public television and are streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Please remain muted until the chair requests comments or questions from the public. Tonight, we're going to welcome a new member of our team. We have a new General Manager of Infrastructure Services, Mr. Tim Koselleck. Welcome, Mr. Koselleck, and I'm going to turn it over to our interim CAO, Mr. Ray Osmond, for an introduction. Mr. Osmond.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Council and the public. It's with great pleasure that I get this opportunity to welcome Tim Koselleck to our Orangeville team. Tim is a professional engineer, and he's moved to Orangeville actually when he was only 3 years old. He's a little larger now. Tim has experience working with similar municipalities of all sizes, small and large. For the past 12 years, Tim has worked at the City of Brampton as a manager of engineering, director of capital works, and director of road maintenance and operations and fleet. I'd also like to add that Tim brings with him a considerable experience in capital works, which is huge on our plate right now. A lot of work being done in that area, particularly in infrastructure services. He also has a lot of operational planning under his belt, as well as a lot of water and wastewater experience and expertise. So we really welcome Tim. It's been a really, really great process in terms of recruitment, and Tim has been a pleasure to work with and discuss things with in the last number of days and weeks. We're looking forward to having Tim on our team and working with the infrastructure services group to move that department forward. Lots of great things on his plate, and he's quite excited about it. And we recently hired as well, along with the same time frame as Tim, a capital works manager in a gentleman by the name of Derek Curry, who was joined us, and we're going to do further introductions on him later in the month of August. I want to again welcome Tim, and I also want to take this opportunity because before council meets again, the interim GM, Gary Koselleck, will be leaving us. Gary has been working with us very diligently over the last number of months and done a tremendous job keeping infrastructure services moving and moving forward. He's been a really delight as well to work with, wonderful personality. He's developed some wonderful relationships with his team, and he's also helped recruit a number of our key players in the infrastructure services side. I want to thank Gary for all of his work. Here he is. And he's been showing tremendous leadership to council and to the CAO's office. And I know that Mr. Brennan would share my comment, and with sincere thank you to Gary for all of his work. And he continue to do that for the next few weeks. He's going to help onboard Tim. He also will be working with onboarding the capital works side. And we have a number of major projects on the table that Gary is really deeply involved in right now. And for the benefit of the town, we'd like to keep Gary on for a few more weeks to make sure we get these things on the right track. And Gary's agreed to doing that. So I want to thank Gary for that as well. So again, Your Worship, welcome to Tim, and a big thank you to Gary for filling in things in the interim way over the last number of months. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, and for later on in our agenda tonight, we're going to see some of the public works projects that are ahead of us. It's a lot, and I know that Tim and his team are up to all of the work that's going to be done in the coming months and years here in Orangeville. And again, Gary, it's been a pleasure to work with you. I speak on behalf of all of council to thank you for the time that you've spent here and your guidance and leadership. And we're certainly looking forward to Tim and his advice and leadership on infrastructure services going forward. Thank you, gentlemen. Gary, did you want to say a few words?
Sure. Thank you very much. I remember my first meeting, I talked for about 5 minutes before I figured out how to turn the mic on. But no, I just sincerely want to thank council. It's been actually a pleasure working here. I think it's been about 8 or 9 months. It's a good council. I worked with all of you collectively and individually. Everybody has the town's best interest at heart, and it's really nice to see. And also, for me, just a special thanks to our team. I think Public Works or Infrastructure Services is very, very blessed. They have a good management team and an excellent staff, and we're very fortunate. So thank you very much.
Great. And Tim, would you like to say a few words as well?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to work with the town. I guess I agree. I moved here when I was 3 and much smaller, but really seen the town change over the years, and it's great to be a big part of it moving forward. And I look forward to the opportunity, and I look forward to meeting everybody more individually and talking a little bit more what the priorities are for everybody. So appreciate the opportunity, and thank you.
All right. Thank you, both Tim and Gary. We're looking forward to seeing what will transpire here on this daunting list of infrastructure projects that's ahead of you. But we're all going to be working together and on behalf of the town and in this town council. Again, I want to thank Gary and welcome Tim. Okay, let's move on. Item number 9. Earlier tonight, we had a closed council session, and we're going to rise and report on the following. This is a recommendation that the 2022-07-11 closed council minutes be approved, and that the confidential report from John Hart, Town Solicitor, regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, be received. And that last part there, we did not receive a report from Mr. Osmond. That's being pushed off until September the 12th, I believe it is. And that staff proceed as directed. Could we have a motion on this, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Thank you. Also, we have, moving on to item 10, we're going to adopt and approve the minutes of the July 11th, 2022 council meetings and the July 18th council public meeting minutes. Could we have a motion to approve those 2 minutes, please? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 11.1, we have Mr. Phil Cernko, President of Black Castle Networks. Mr. Cernko is going to present a telecommunications report. Mr. Cernko, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here and certainly to talk about this important report. We do have some slides just as a logistics check. Will this should I share my slides on screen, or will they be shared by someone else just for technical logistics?
You go ahead and share them.
Go ahead and share your slides. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Will do. Let me just share this. So just as a check, are you able to see the screen okay?
Yes.
I'll just switch this. Okay. So pleasure to be here once again. And my company, Black Castle Networks, my team conducted an important communications review of both the town of Orangeville and county tri-services interoperability and communications posture. And we found a number of issues, which we'll talk about today, which is a summary of our report, our full report, which was made available to the town and to the county stakeholders. We'll begin with an overview of current communications issues, which I'll provide now, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the solutions that we proposed. First off, a little bit of a geographic overview of some of the main issues. In speaking with stakeholders and reviewing the various documentation and materials made available as part of the communications infrastructure documentation, we identified three main areas where there were problems for reception of public safety communications within the town, and then also we'll talk about the county, which is important for interoperability and mutual aid in times of crisis and need. And so what we found is within the town, in particular at both the Headwaters Hospital facility, the commercial area to the north of the town, as well as in an industrial area towards the center, there were numerous anecdotes from first responders of communications issues, receiving and making calls. And so we determined in our analysis that there were changes necessary to the radio infrastructure within the town, which can be made in order to remedy this important concern. So certainly from a 911 interoperability, mutual aid, and continuity of operation stance, it's very important in our company's opinion that we remedy these issues. They are potential liability for line of duty deaths, and also just are important from a stance of efficiency in 911 operations, field operations. So that was the first area that we provided in terms of our summary report. We also looked at interoperability with other fire agencies in neighboring areas, both to the town of Caledon as well as within the Dufferin County. And in our staff interviews, a number of concerns were also noted within the county proper. Problems with basic radio reception in these areas. Some of the problems were root caused to power levels or configurations in how the infrastructure was set up. There were also incompatibilities identified, and also issues with the way that the radio system was engineered. So today there is a bit of a disparate sort of patchwork quilt of radio systems within the county, and certainly they both impact county operations as well as mutual aid with the town of Orangeville. So in times of need, as noted, first responder agencies will go to the assistance of their neighboring counterparts. And so this certainly impacts continuity of operations, and in our opinion is a serious issue for both health and safety of 911 operators and field staff, but also for the community in terms of effective response for 911 calls. In our opinion, these are a concerning liability that should be addressed, and we recommended in our full report, which was available, that corrective action should be taken as soon as possible. And again, our full report, and we also provided an executive summary of 30 pages. Our full report is about 400 pages. We go in depth on these issues. So this is a bit of a summary of how or what did we do to get here. So what are some of the root causes behind the problems and the concerns? So three main areas that we'll summarize here this evening. The first is the incomplete and somewhat, as I noted, fragmented county-wide system. So there were plans afoot a number of years ago to provide a simulcast, which is a variety of technology, a simulcast system that would be essentially providing RF coverage, radio frequency coverage across the county and for the town. And so what we found in there is the first concern, 1A, is a lack of intersite linkages for wide area communication. So as I noted earlier, each of the sites for both the county and as well as the town operate essentially as silos. And so there are a lack of intersite linkages that would permit a communicator in the south, for example, to communicate with counterparts that are arriving on scene from the north and vice versa. And so this is the first major concern. It means that there are disparate communications that are not linked across the county and both with the town. There also, 1B, we identified a number of potential self-interference issues within the county. And again, the implication is county is involved in town of Orangeville interoperability. So there is a number of VHF paging devices. The radio sites themselves are also used to page volunteer firefighters, as well as provide primary response communications, and it essentially creates a self-interference impact. 1C is referring to RF coverage gaps due to the original design, essentially related to non-optimized RF site locations. So the site locations are not essentially properly spaced to provide optimal coverage. And also there are some concerns about power levels and such. 1D refers to the lack of interoperability with neighboring systems. So for example, in communicating with your counterparts to the south in Caledon, today there is a lack of interoperability which requires the use of donor radio. So you have to physically bring devices that are tuned and configured for the Caledon system and vice versa. And certainly this is not best practice in North America-wide or worldwide for how first response should be done, especially in more urban, suburban settings. And so we noted that in a report, as well as the way the technology was set up. There's no ability in the current infrastructure to link digitally or in terms of communications linked with the neighboring systems. 1E, it refers to the vintage of the technology. So the technology today is an analog technology for a number of the sites. We've moved to digital technology over the past 20 years. As well, there's a certain vintage or flavor of technology that's used, which is called simulcast, and that feature has not been spread across the county radio sites. And so again, we have this disparate sort of patchwork quilt of interoperability problems across the devices as a result. 1F is the unencrypted nature of LMR, which is an acronym that refers to land mobile radio, or essentially walkie-talkie first responder communications. And they are unencrypted today. And so as a result, scanners, the public, hackers, etc. It is a cybersecurity problem, a security problem, certainly not a best practice. And we also included recommendations to remedy that in our report as well. 1G and H refer to, again, design issues, essentially in the fact that there was no countywide equipment strategy or replacement strategy. And so essentially we're exposed to sparing problems. Also, the system itself does not have a data capability today. And as first responders, the wave of the future is the use of data in addition to voice communications for efficient 911 response. And so we provided recommendations on that, as well as we identified a number of technical single points of failure, which again is certainly not a best practice in telecom design, and proposed around those as well. Number 2 is the overall maintenance and operations. So again, we looked at through the lens of best practices from North America-wide agencies that we've been involved with over the last 25 years plus, is that a number of issues in the way that operations are conducted with the radio system. So first, we noted a lack of on-site sparing. That's an issue. If you don't have a critical part that's available, if a breakage occurs, especially in this day and age of sourcing issues, you essentially could put the system at risk for multi-day outages. And so we strongly recommend a new posture for operations going forward. Documentation as well were not available in short order. And also there was some question about the scope of maintenance in contract terms. And last but not least, the equipment compatibilities, which we alluded to a little bit earlier, especially for Orangeville. Your primary response partners are with the town of Caledon and also with the county. And we noted incompatibility of radio devices between those users. Again, it's that donor radio issue. As well, we recommend alignment with the county and with your neighbors for strategic operations and life cycle planning posture. We provide additional details again in our full report, which is available, as well as the 30-page executive summary. A little bit about now the opportunities to solve the existing issues and improve the 911 response for the county. So again, a lot of sort of solutions that we were analyzed throughout the course of the project. We landed on, after again numerous permutations and business modeling, cost modeling, a recommendation for a 2-site land mobile radio conventional refresh for the town of Orangeville. as well the use of new digital technology and what is called a land mobile radio core. So that core network for the town of Orangeville would provide the ability to link other radio sites, again, in that wide area, a sort of cohesive manner. So both for the county as well as for linking to your primary partners in Caledon, it will vastly improve your interoperability going forward. Coupled with that, as noted, data is certainly a new critical function for first responders. Everything from cloud communications to digital communications. Also, the advent of something called NextGen 911, which is coming in the next couple of years, means that data is more and more important. And there's an interesting opportunity for co-locating 5G sites in something called public safety broadband networks alongside LMRs. So it's a new hybrid methodology for first responder communications, which is the wave of the future worldwide for 911 response. And so we also recommend, given the opportunity and sort of the timeliness of this replacement cycle, that we look at that hybrid technology. And we recommend, therefore, a co-location of PSBN sites. It's a certain digital broadband technology at the new LMR sites, and also a linking to a new Ontario provincial public safety broadband network initiative. So there are core networks available from Peel and Halton. A number of regional municipalities in Ontario and Canada-wide are, quote, plugging in. And it's an interesting opportunity for the town of Orangeville to consider, and we include that as an option in our recommendations. Last but not least, at the bottom box, what you'll see is an optional scenario which was included in our strategic modeling, and that is a county-wide scenario. So if the county were to elect to do so, it could essentially add on to the recommended two-site posture or constellation for the town of Orangeville, and essentially plug in 4 additional sites to provide seamless continuity of operations across the county. And so that proposal and those recommendations are also included in a report. In terms of the investment, there are a number of opportunities for grants and funding, which the town of Orangeville would be eligible for. We provide this detail along with the costing analysis in a report. And again, there are healthy funds available, which the town would be eligible for, which are noted here on screen. There's also an additional fund which is being established very recently, which also would be a 7th opportunity for the town to gain telecom grants, which would offset some of the capital investment costs. So again, it's a timely opportunity, both with respect to the Public Safety Broadband Network Initiative in Ontario and across Canada, but also in terms of existing grant funds from Industry Canada, as well as the CRTC and other organizations. And so these funds would be available to offset some of the capital investment costs as part of rural broadband digital divide investment in Canada, and also first responder preparedness. So again, we provided details on these potential grant funds in our report as well. And last but not least, some of the benefits of this proposed new posture. So we boil them down into 3 main areas. So the first is, again, very critical, removing the potential legal liabilities from the existing radio system failures and issues. So the issues, as noted, were chronic and long-standing. There are potential liabilities for line of duty deaths, but also just impacting the effectiveness of 911 field operations. And so we recommend strongly that we remedy those as soon as possible. They will ultimately improve community safety and well-being with better 911 outcomes and better digital communications for 911 operations. The second item is to improve the interoperability among current 911 field staff for both police, fire, EMS, and your neighboring communities. And so, again, the benefit here is correcting those long-standing interoperability issues. So we talked about the analog, digital, and also the incompatibility problems. So we would remedy those with the proposed plan, which would also, again, in number 2B, improve the 911 response outcomes for community safety. And number 3, the deployment of that hybrid model, again, the model that 911 response is taking worldwide in the 21st century, a hybrid of land mobile radio, the traditional walkie-talkie with new broadband digital technology. So this new hybrid model brings additional critical infrastructure and 911 benefits. So in number 3A, the new data and private 5G capabilities allow you to bring new voice and data capabilities to both town first responders for 911, But also there's an interesting angle in terms of critical infrastructure such as electric utilities, waterworks, public works, and again, all those other heavy industry applications that could use this as a critical data pipe for sensitive or cyber secure networking needs. In number 3B, there's that enhanced cybersecurity posture we talked about, which is so critical. So utilities across Canada are eager to avail themselves of private spectrum, again, for those sensitive critical infrastructure needs that we've seen worldwide. Number 3C, we did a full business case model, and the PSBN investment as a sort of add-on to the land mobile radio element has a very positive return on investment. So again, we provide all those details in the financial modeling, and we indicate a significant cost savings, again, due to the high telecom costs for the deployment of this for the first responder and critical infrastructure community. 1D and E kind of combined. It's that improvement of 911 communications, given the advent of digital communications rising in importance, again, in these trends that we see worldwide for 911 response. And in light of the recent commercial carrier outages, so the recent Rogers outage has essentially underlined the importance of data for first responders. So many anecdotes available in the press about 911 response, how it was impacted when the Rogers system went down recently. And it's simply one of many examples of the importance of data and the need for something a little bit better than commercial carrier networks for disaster preparedness and also for just day-to-day use. And so there's certainly that angle of improving reliability and resiliency, as well as improving the municipal disaster preparedness posture. So PSBN, Public Safety Broadband Networks, are the North America-wide interoperability and disaster radio frequency communications medium of choice. And so in times of need, that system will be used. It's incumbent on Canadians to also deploy and have that available. So again, improving the municipal disaster response is also a key element of our proposed recommendations. Last but not least, it's the additional call capability that Public Safety Broadband Network provides as both a backup for the land mobile radio system. So hybrid users are able to use both the land mobile radio as well as the Public Safety Broadband Network. And also it's available to the community as a whole as a backup for commercial radio needs. So again, if there were a disaster, a tornado, or what have you, a natural disaster, that system can also serve the needs of the public as well as first responders. So many benefits, including these and others, are included in our full report. And so that was a bit of a short overview. Again, a lot of details, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions at this time.
Okay, we've got Councillor Andrews and then Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I know that the Deputy Mayor, I'm not sure if he had his hand up before mine, but I know that he has quite a bit of experience in the radio communication side. I do too as well. Surprisingly, in my previous career, I was responsible for broadcast operations. And so I read this report with a lot of intrigue and interest. And again, Mr. Chernow, thank you so much for being here. A comment and also a question. I have a little bit of an interest and background through my participation with OSARVA, which is the Ontario Search and Rescue Volunteer Association, and also having had conversations with Mr. Murphy at the county level. And these things came up several times. And you referenced, of course, compatibility. You talked about the digitization that has occurred, which is so important for the sake of fluid and communication amongst, of course, emergency responders and those that are tied in so many different ways. But I take a look at the piece that you highlighted is, of course, we have kind of a hodgepodge across this region that we have to find some common ground to ensure that we don't have a disconnect. So that is really, really important. The question I have is really based on a comment that you made not only at the beginning but also at the end of your presentation about the importance, of course, of not only the typical broadcast system but also the importance in an emergency. The idea of ensuring that we don't have any impediments that typically can end up occurring from a technological point of view. And I'm a firm believer that sometimes you got to spend money to ensure that you ensure the safety of the residents. But from a technological point of view, the topography, in your opinion, does that still pose a challenge if we're looking at kind of partnerships or the connections between some of those other parties that you referenced? And then also, we take a look at structural impedance, that impediments that can exist as well. I just want to hear your take on that. But again, I was very impressed by what this report has highlighted so far.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And no, great questions, certainly. And as you noted, a very important topic as data, voice, so critical for effective 911 response. To the question on the topology, so I think you're referring to geographic or kind of aspects. I'll simply go back to the previous slide. What we see here is if you look in detail, and maybe if I zoom in, there are sites indicated. Sort of they're a little bit hard to see on this particular map in the report. It's more easy to view, but the locations of the sites are unfortunately not optimal for the geography. To your point, there is a challenging geography in terms of eastern valleys within the county that create what were called shadowing effects. So if you think of a beam of light, the light casts a shadow on the far side of let's say some hilly terrain. And so there is hilly terrain in the east, which does impact the performance. However, if you look at the location of the constellation of sites, if you can see, I'll perhaps try to zoom in a little bit. You can see two sites, for example, the two blue dots here in the central area. Those are two of the sites that are currently deployed in the constellation, and they're unfortunately not optimal in order to provide coverage for the hilly terrain in the east. First of all, they're located too close together. In using that specific flavor of technology I referred to called simulcast, which is a certain type of radio modulation for radio frequencies. The sites are simply too close to gain the benefits of that technology. And so unfortunately, the locations of the site are suboptimal, which does impact the geographic coverage, as you noted. In our report recommendations, we provide a proposed new constellation which would spread the sites more appropriately to leverage the benefits of simulcast technology, which would improve the coverage in those hilly terrain areas that you noted. As well, some of the issues that we see to the south, this sort of U-shaped area is again a bit of a factor related to the site locations. And so that, as well as some of the power levels and other technical aspects in a report, will remedy these geographic impacts that you noted. Absolutely. And I think the second part of your question was looking to the future. So the digital aspect and how technology is changing 911 response. Especially, I'll note the next generation 911 will be the digitization of 911 calling. So in the future, civilians will be able to, over the next 3 to 5 years, be able to start using text messaging to dial 911 in addition to analog voice technology that we see today. Also, we'll be able to, in the future, use video calling, video being a new killer app for society that we've seen over the last 2 years and beyond, as well as other digital techniques, and which have, again, been started to be deployed in North America and are so important for 911 response. So if the civilian population is using these new digital means to communicate with 911 dispatchers, it's so important that the last mile link to first responders also be resilient. And so that's why the use of PSBN is also another tool in the toolbox that we recommend for first responders and part of our proposal. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but happy to.
Very much so. And very quickly, Worship, I have just a very quick question here pertaining to co-location and antenna utilization. In this case, do you think we have optimum antennas? I know you referenced it in one of your slides, or do we have to take a look at through either partnership, co-locating, and or a new tower? Do we have towers that are high enough to meet the needs of this area?
So there are existing towers, which we noted in a report. We did a survey of the existing assets that are available from third parties in the area. There are a number of candidates in the locations that we recommend for the new sites. So there is an opportunity, which we recommend, in a tendering process, that proposals be provided for the new sites. Unfortunately, yes, I agree with your comments, and it is in a report that the antennas themselves, the power levels are unfortunately inappropriate. There might be some reuse of some of the assets available today in a new system, but a number of elements will need to be replaced. As noted, I think there is substantial cost savings and benefit just from the liability and disaster preparedness aspect. We do in our report also include financial benefits that accrue due to a framework called the UN Sendai framework, which is a way to sort of amortize the benefits of risk mitigation for disaster preparedness. So there are benefits that you can use to justify sort of a capital investment for land mobile radio. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
very much so. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Worship. I listened to your presentation with great interest. Everything you said is pretty well spot on. I actually helped set up the system 20 years ago that we currently have, and everything you're saying is true. My concern is we're basically dealing with three different systems. We've got the county on analog, we've got Orangeville on digital, and I'm not sure what Caledon calls their system, but it's not compatible with anything we have. To make this work, we need everybody on board, not just Orangeville. So that's my concern with this whole idea. I think it's a great idea, and our radio system is probably coming due. Like I say, it's been about 20 years now. We're not quite as desperate maybe as we can talk to the county. All the portables are able to switch over to Dufferin County channels, but Caledon, you're correct. They need a separate portable just to talk to Caledon, and Caledon spent millions and millions of dollars on their system. So I don't know how thrilled they would be to change to whatever we decide to go with, but I think this is more of a bigger picture than just the town of Orangeville.
No, that's great comments, and a few points, and I agree with all your points. First off, in our recommendations, the Caledon interoperability aspect we address with the use of this new land mobile radio core, as we call it here. So in our proposed solution, there is a new sort of brain to the land mobile radio network that has a feature called Intersystem Interoperability, ISSI, which is part of a suite of standards called Project 25, which is essentially the North America-wide standard for land mobile radio. Caledon is using that standard, Project 25. In our recommendation, this new core or brain to the land mobile radio network has that feature that allows plugging into the Caledon network, which is part of actually the Peel regional network as it happens. And so we've included in our costing the cost for that interoperability piece that would allow you to plug in your core to the Caledon or Peel regional core system. So we include that costing in our analysis to plug into Caledon. And I would agree with the other assertion. Certainly best practices is you look at a holistic, a strategic angle for your county, for your municipalities, but also for your neighboring communities. And I would strongly suggest that the county consider that optional county scenario from the get-go. It certainly would benefit their disaster preparedness, but also yours, because you are so tightly linked. Again, in times of need, the first people coming to your assistance will be your neighbors in the county, as well as Caledon. So our strong recommendation in the report is that the county deploy simultaneous to Orangeville. However, if they do need to delay for whatever reason, we have structured also in our costing this scenario where you could build Orangeville first or start with Orangeville, and then the county users can later plug in. And that's in fact a methodology that's used often in county systems North America-wide. In the United States in particular, one agency will deploy first and others, municipalities will, quote, plug in to that lead agency. So there's that aspect that we've included in our costing. You could go first, the county could come later and plug in their radio sites. So you do have that option. But certainly, I think for cost savings, you would gain additional synergies by doing it all at once, because you wouldn't have to rework of redesigning and re-verifying things once they join. So it can be done either way, but certainly I agree with you. We would recommend the county strongly consider joining right from the initial deployment.
Yeah, just further to that.
Answer. Yeah, sure.
Just further to that, my concern is the county, because they don't like spending a lot of money on fire departments, and we tried to get radio systems even as soon as 3 years ago, I believe, on county council, we tried to get a new radio antennas put up, and they just don't want to spend any money. You mentioned safety and stuff. Safety doesn't always take a priority in some cases, unfortunately. And I just think it would be a tough sell to the county. That just a comment. Thank you for your presentation.
No, thank
All
you.
right.
And certainly, I think, sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a comment?
Yes, Ms. McKinney.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, Mr. Mayor, through you, Deputy Mayor, your point is certainly taken. The county was consulted throughout a couple of times throughout both the presentation and the stakeholder meetings, and they really have referred us to work with the local fire departments. They view there being a distinction between the corporation of Dufferin and the county of Dufferin at large. And so Jason has been having those conversations, and that is a conversation that does progress. And he's on the line if you would like more information on that.
Very good. Thank you. All right, Mr. Cernko, thank you very much for your presentation and your proposal. We'll be reviewing it shortly and our staff reports. Council, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, let's move on to 12.1. So this is the telecommunications report CPS 2022-062, a recommendation that this report be received and that staff be authorized to pursue grant funding for initiatives related to upgrading the town's telecommunications systems. Could we have a motion on this, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Any further questions, councillors, on this item? No, we'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cernko. Moving on to 12.2. This is the 2022 second quarter capital progress report, CPS 2022-055. The recommendation is that this report regarding the 2022 second quarter capital progress be received. Can we have a motion to receive this, please? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Any comments or questions, councillors? All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to 12.3, this is an information update, building modernization and energy savings collaboration, report CPS 2022-056. The recommendation is that the report regarding an update on the ESCO procurement process be received. May I have a motion to receive, please? Councillor Taylor, second by Councillor Post. Any questions on this? Councillor, seeing none. All in favor? Very good. Moving on to 12.4, the 2022 second quarter operating fund variance, CPS 2022-057. A recommendation that this report regarding the 2022 second quarter operating fund variance be received. Can I have a motion to receive, please? Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Taylor. Any questions on this, council? All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to 12.5, 2022 community grants update. This is report CPS 2022-058, and the recommendation is that the report be received and that council approve the distribution of 2022 community grants budgeted funds of $150. Can I have a motion on this, please? Councillor Taylor, second by Councillor Sherwood. Any comments on this? All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to 12.6, ISIP Green Stream Funding Agreement, CPS 2022-060. The recommendation that this report, the ISIP Green Stream Funding Agreement, be received and the council pass a bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign a transfer payment agreement with the Ministry of Infrastructure for funding. May I have a motion on this, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any questions, councillors, on this item? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. Item 12.7, Section 357 tax appeals. a recommendation that this report, CPS 2022-061, regarding Section 357 tax appeals for 2022 be received, and the council authorize reduction in property tax totaling $2,948.37. Can we have a motion on this, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Any questions, council? All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to 12.8, Budget 2023 Schedule and Direction, Report CPS 2022-063. This is a recommendation that this report, Budget 2023 Schedule and Direction, be received, and the council endorse receiving a 5-year budget outlook for operating budget and a 10-year budget outlook for capital budget deliberations. And the council approved maintaining of the cost of living allowance equivalent to the same level as 2022 of 2% as a guideline to report a budget for non-union staff salary and benefits in the proposed 2023 budget. And the council approved an additional $200,000 to bring annual contribution to capital budget from $2.6 million to $2.8 million in light of global inflationary pressures. Could we have a motion on this, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Any questions on this report? Councillor Taylor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Two things, if I may. One, technology-wise, this, just so you know, Mr. Bonato, this screen is about 8 seconds behind, so it's quite bizarre. You're calling something that's not happening, so I just want people to know that. And then on to the business angle. I certainly appreciate the report. Great report, really thoughtful, completely on point with what's happening in the world today. I worry, and I don't know that we need to do this now. It's probably a budgetary time because I know it's just directional. I worry that we might be being too conservative here and too optimistic in terms of what's going to happen. So the 2% piece is something that's probably going to have to be discussed, and $200,000. I know that I think what you've done there is just, it's about 8% and that's where the inflation rate was. It's just, you know, what we're seeing in terms of capital projects and, you know, force majeure and all those types of things. It's a difficult time. So I just worry that we might be a little too optimistic as we pass this, but I think directionally it's fine to do so. But I wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any further comments? Councillor Peters, go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I was also going to comment on the COLA piece. You know, the town had a rule, so to speak, about when to take it. Obviously, recent history has broken that rule to bits, but it seems a little counterintuitive to be increasing the capital piece without increasing the COLA piece. And I know it'll be debated heavily, and we're not setting it in stone, but I think in terms of showing, you know, our residents and our current staff and potentially future staff that we are listening and looking at the numbers, I would suggest that even as a placeholder, we should be increasing that 2%.
Madam Treasurer, your comments, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you to Councillor Taylor and Councillor Peters. So the proposition of keeping it 2% is based on the fact that it has been a historical number that we have used, and it's sort of, you know, making sure that we are not increasing our overall tax levy to the point that, I mean, we have had tremendous tax rate levies increase for the last 3 years. So I just wanted to make sure that the 2% is in line with those last 3 budgets that we have delivered. Now, one thing that I would like to point out to this council is that we have recently, or the town has recently undertaken a market review process, and that has contributed to the overall increase in our salary base. So this 2% is on top of that. So perhaps I wasn't very clear in my report. That said, if council wishes to add to that, this would be an opportunity. I do agree with the fact that, yes, this can be further discussed and debated during the budget process. However, given that salary is our biggest operating expense, any direction that I can get ahead of time really would help our the finance department in putting together the budget document. So that would be my comment. Back to you, Your Worship.
So, Councillor Peters, the market rate adjustment on salaries has already taken place, and we did agree to increase wages. So my guess would be the recommendation of the treasurer should stand, considering some of those wage increases are already been put in place. Unless you want to try some amendment to this, Councillor Peters, or?
I mean, through you, I understand the notion, but I do believe they're separate entities. If the town was at market rates, we would be discussing the COLA as its own issue. So I can appreciate that in relation to the budget, it may be a double whammy, so to speak. But, you know, if everyone else is spending 5 to 8% more on their daily lives and we toe the line at 2%, it doesn't seem responsible. Obviously, I would not propose going to 5 or plus or anything like that, but even you know, a gesture in the direction so that the first cut of the budget at least rolls that in, because we don't know how much it may increase between now and next budget as well, right? The next budget will be delayed because of the election. So I'd like to see at least you know, taking some responsibility for that and maybe going to 2.5.
Okay, sorry, say that last line again, Councillor Peters. You suggest?
I was saying, I think a gesture by this council to get it into the first cut of the budget would be valuable, and I would suggest 2.5.
Right. And do you want to give the treasurer that direction now, Councillor Peters, or wait until the first cut of the budget?
I think to the treasurer's point, any direction in establishing that first cut is valuable. I mean, where it lands is where it lands, but where it starts should at least reflect the current leadership, I think, and the current economic situation.
Okay. Do we have anybody want to second that on council here? Councillor Taylor? Okay. Well, so we have an amendment then to this recommendation to move COLA from 2% to 2.5%. Councillor Post, you wish to make a comment?
Yeah, just before we vote on that, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand where this motion is coming from and where this thought process is coming from, but because we do typically use, as the treasurer has stated, a bit of a historical context, I worry that we're maybe jumping the gun a little bit. And next year, because hopefully this year is an anomaly with the amount of an inflation that we're seeing, but what we're doing then is we're really moving up the base budget significantly. That next year, when it rolls around for the following budget, if we're still in a position where inflation is as high as we're seeing it now, that will be reflected in that COLA from the historical data from the previous year. That would be my hesitation in voting for this right now, because it will increase that overall operating budget by another 0.5%.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm trying to sign in here. I'm realizing I can't sign in, so I have to put my hand up. I do agree with Councillor Post. I guess the only piece to me is maybe it's where it is. Like if it's not in wages and it's not in capital projects, perhaps it's just in a miscellaneous bucket for now that says, hey, we recognize that this might be higher than we think. Looks like we've lost our network stream here. I don't know if people can still hear us or not, but it just would be prudent, I think, to recognize where we are in some sort of way. And again, this doesn't tie us to a budget. It's just essentially a planning tool.
Mr. Bonato, is Mr. Taylor, we can hear both of us because we've lost our screen here. Okay.
We can hear you. Yes.
Thank you. Just hold for a moment here. We do have a motion here to amend. So as soon as we get the screen back up here, we'll call a vote on that amendment.
Mr. Mayor, the Deputy Mayor has his hand up as well.
Okay, folks, we're going to call a 5-minute recess here. We've got a little technological glitch and we're going to work on it. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, sir.
I was just going to say, I have no problem with the 2.5, but I won't be supporting this only because I think it should be up to the next council to basically set the standard. Again, I have no issue with it. If we were voting on it today, I would say no problem, but because there is a new council coming in, and I think they should be the ones making that decision. Thank you.
Okay, so we did have a motion, Councillor Peters, second by Councillor Taylor, to amend the COLA to 2.5. Any further comments on that before we call a vote on that amendment? Councillor Taylor?
I just want to make the point, like, I think the deputy mayor is correct, and I would be aligned with his thinking. I'm concerned we don't have I'm concerned we don't have enough money set aside, and I'm not married to 2.5 COLA. I just think we should have a miscellaneous fund. But he's right too. Like, I mean, it can go off to the next council. It's just, I don't want to be disingenuous. If people are out there saying, hey, you promised me you do this or you do that, and now you're here and it's why. Anybody who thinks, you know, that we can be 0% or save on our taxes as we go forward in this environment is lying, unless they're going to cut something. And that's all I wanted to do here, is make the point that we're heading into some very tumultuous waters here. So, you know, we don't need to pass this today. I mean, as long as we made the point and it goes to the budget time, I'm fine with that as well. And I think I'm uncomfortable putting the 2.5 in. So I guess if it's going to fail, I'll follow along. But it's something that the public needs to be aware of, and all of us who are sitting here and anyone who's running should be aware of as well, that this is a different environment. It's not true. So, Madam Treasurer.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to council. So just a couple of points that I would like to make that I've already made in my report. So in addition to the COLA adjustment, as well as the additional $200,000 that we're asking to support our capital budget, we also have to consider some of the other budgetary pressures that we will be seeing with 2023. And one of the notable ones is the transit relief program, because the subsidy, well, the taxation has now have to subsidize the delta or the loss of revenue. The other thing council has to consider is that during COVID, we did get some help from the upper level of government, namely the provincial government. So moving forward, we may not have those safety nets. And again, I'm clearly not 100% sure as to how province is going to roll out any support as it relates to the inflationary pressures. So if you look at my report, there are some additional pressures that we're looking at. And I don't want to give out a number right now, but I can tell you this, that the last 3 years that we have enjoyed really very respectable tax levy increases is probably not going to happen in 2023. Even just based on my report, you're probably looking at a close to north of 2.5 to 3% tax levy, just based on the budgetary pressures that I've provided in my report. And I even haven't started the document yet. Now, as a staff member, I clearly cannot be opposed to increasing COLA. All I'm suggesting today is that while you consider the increase in COLA, you also have to take into consideration some of the other budgetary pressures that I have pointed out in the report. And this is, again, as your treasurer for the last 3 years, you've come to respect my conservative approach to budgeting, and that's where I'm standing with this report. So I hope that would provide, or that has provided, some additional information.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It doesn't sound like it's going to go anywhere. I just think it sends the wrong message to, increase capital without increasing it on the staff side. And I can't imagine a new council or some portion of this and new council is going to come in next year excited to increase the COLA. So by bumping it up by a step at this point, it's twofold. I think it speaks to the climate that we're in, and it also prevents a difficult decision on whether to increase it when budget comes around, but I will leave it at that.
Very good, sir. Thank you. So we have a motion to amend to COLA from 2% to 2.5 to give direction to our treasurer. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? All right, so that fails. Now let's vote on the, let's have a motion on the, as it's been written here by the treasurer. Do we have a motion? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any further comments before we vote on this recommendation? No, all in favor? And opposed? All right, thank you very much, Madam Treasurer and Council. Moving on to 12.9, this is a report on new businesses in Orangeville, March 1st to June 30th, 2022. Recommendation that report CMS 2022-016, new businesses in Orangeville, March 1st, June 30th, 2020 be received. It's always exciting to see these reports. New businesses and people investing in our town is always great to see. Can we have a motion on this, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Very good. I just wanted to correct myself here on 12.8. So in opposition was Councillor Peters. The rest of council had voted in favor, just to set the record publicly on that. So we do have a motion now. Councillor Andrews wishes to speak. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to echo exactly what you said. It is even in these times to see the commitment of individuals who invest in our community, and I know that we have not only the 9 new businesses and 5 home-based businesses that have opened up, but even after the date of this particular report, we've had some additional businesses that have joined our community, and I know that Ms. Phillips and her team in economic development will provide that update for us possibly at some point. But it's always great to see people committing to our community and investing in our community.
Yeah, we all found out that Orangeville likes fresh baked goods, didn't we? So that'll be coming out in the next quarter report. Okay, so this is a recommendation that this report be received. All in favor? All right, thank you. Moving on to 12.10, the development of 82 and 86 to 90 Broadway, the report CMS 2022-018, that this report regarding the development of 82 and 86 to 90 Broadway be received, and that council direct staff to complete a 2023 capital budget submission for consulting services required to oversee and manage all elements of a detailed proposal call and related processes for the development of 82 and 86 to 90 Broadway. Could we have a motion on this, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Councillor Andrews, you wish to speak?
I do, and I know that we've had an amendment to our agenda, so subsequently I ended up referencing one page on the previous agenda, which was, I think, page 122. And, you know, it highlights in the report a key part that I agree with, which is, in fact, the hiring of the consultant. You know, it kind of reflects back to the community improvement plan presentation that we had, I guess, at our previous meeting and or subsequent previous meetings. And, you know, what this requires is not, again, to have something like this, the magnitude of what this could end up being on the side of someone's desk. We need to have, however it ends up being, an appropriate consultant or whomever it ends up being to guide this and to see it come to fruition. So, you know, that is my comment to Your Worship, but I thought it was important to share because there's a lot of good things that we see in front of us, but we have to make sure that this is handled properly.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. And, you know, this is going to be, this development in combination with a number of developments between here and Highway 10 are going to sort of set this town up, really, the entry point to our town. And it's very important work. And let's hope that the streetscape and the architecture is all looked at very closely and you know, melds together and creates a very beautiful entry point to our town and our downtown core. Councillor Taylor, go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I really just want to echo what yourself and Councillor Andrews have said. Like, to me, this development and the way Broadway is going to look as we come in is super, super important. And this land that we have, it's in short supply. Like, we need to make the right decisions. So I was very, very pleased to see this on the agenda. I'm excited to spend the money, which I know is a crazy thing to say, but I think this is a good spend. We'll know what we're going to be doing moving forward, and we'll do something that everyone in Orangeville will be proud of. So kudos to staff for pushing this forward and continuing to see where we're going to go with this.
Very good. I also wanted to make a comment. There was, I think, sort of discussion of maybe 5,000 square feet of commercial in the report. I'm just wondering if the consultant could also consider, could this space on the second, third floor be considered as office space? We're looking at, trying to create white collar jobs in our town and maybe stop commuting. Maybe there's a business that might want to locate in our beautiful downtown core. So I don't think we should leave out the potential of office space in this building. Although, we look at the history of the public health building, it's sat for years actually before being fully occupied. But, things have changed in the past 2 or 3 years. There may be some businesses who would like to locate here. We've got our now up and coming, robust, future-proof internet, fiber optic internet here. There could be some businesses that might want to locate here. I see Ms. Phillips has lit up her screen. Do you wish to comment, ma'am?
Thank you, Your Worship. You're absolutely right. It's important to remember that scenarios 1 and 3 that we kind of decided to move forward with are design concepts. So there's lots of opportunity to make changes to those. Even since 2020, when what we call scenario 3, which was a building on Broadway and one on Armstrong Street, the proposal was that building on Armstrong Street be fully residential. Well, even since 2020, there's been some retail development take place along Armstrong Street. So it may be, as we refine these plans, that we would want to look at having a retail or commercial component on the Armstrong Street building as well. But certainly they are at the initial design stage, so we can look at all kinds of options, sir.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, you'll recall the last 2 times this came up, I was pushing for a wider definition of mixed use there, so I'm glad you brought it up. At this point, my understanding, and it sounds like Ms. Phillips has confirmed it, this is really to get someone on board to flush out those concepts, and happy to hear that those are still on the table because, such a prime piece of real estate should really house as many, different and central concepts as it can rather than, a 95% residential if possible. Obviously, it'll come down to other factors, but I was glad to hear you bring that up.
Yeah, I remember you did comment, Councillor Peters, about, I think it was in Kitchener-Waterloo, where they had a farmer's market situation. So, creating a ground floor open space that could be used both in summer and winter in such a location is something that is of interest to me. I'd like to look at that and the viability of it. Obviously, the cost recovery of maybe having residential up above makes sense to pay for some communal space that could be used for multiple things other than the farmer's market down on the lower floor. So yeah, all these things are open and need to be investigated, and the consultant, I'm sure, is going to be able to look at the lay of the land from a commercial real estate's perspective when the time is right. And I think businesses are going to try and locate in towns like ours, particularly with the robust internet that we're putting in place now. And there could be some job opportunities here and job creation opportunities if we provide the right type of real estate for that. So all to be considered. So if there's any other comments, let's hear it now. If not, let's vote on receiving this report and giving the direction required. All in favor? Very good. Thank you, Council. Moving on to 12.11. This is Next Generation 911, the Authority Service Agreement, CMS 2022-019. The recommendation that this report, Next Generation 911 Authority Service Agreement, be received, and the council pass a bylaw to enter into an agreement for the delivery of 911 services with the County of Dufferin. Could we have a motion on this, please? Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Any comments on this, Council? Yes, Councillor Sherwood, go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship, perhaps you can remind me, I thought we had already put the services through Brampton Dispatch.
No, I think it's Tillsonburg actually that's handling our 911. Deputy Mayor, did you want to share something there?
Actually, I believe it's Sudbury.
Oh, Sudbury.
Oh, Northern 911 is handling the 911. Yes. That's right, and fire dispatch is through Tillsonburg, right?
You are correct.
Oh, yeah. Fire dispatch. That's what I was getting confused with. Okay, and that's okay. Thank you. That's rerouted. If someone calls for fire through the 911 up north, then it goes over to Kitchener?
Tillsonburg.
Or Tillsonburg.
Tillsonburg is.
I'm all over Ontario tonight,
where
aren't
the hub is, yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, any further comments on this before we vote? No, all in favor? Thank you, Council. Moving on to 12.12, a lease extension for Mel Skate Shop. This is CMS-2022-020. Recommendation that this report, the lease extension for Mel Skate Shop, be received, and that Council direct staff to extend the lease agreement with the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville and Mel Skate Shop for 1 additional year, and the Council pass a bylaw to authorize the Mayor and Clerk to sign the necessary agreement. Can we have a motion on this? Councillor Sherwood, second by Councillor Taylor. We wish Mel all the best. I know the last couple of years have been difficult for many businesses, including his, with all the starts and stops that we had at our Parks and Recreation facilities, and Alder in particular. So I wish Mel all the best in the coming year. Let's hope it's hockey's back on and in full tilt for the entire season. All in favor? Thank you. All right, moving on to 12.13. This is intersection all-way stop review, various locations, report INS 2022-049. Recommendation that this report, intersection all-way stop review, be received and the council pass a bylaw to implement an all-way stop at the intersection of College Avenue and Fieldgate Drive, and the council pass a bylaw to implement an all-way stop at the intersection of Spencer Avenue and Cornwall Gate/Abbey Road, and that staff update the all-way stop policy to reflect the current criteria as set out in Book 5 of the Ontario Traffic Manual, dated December 2021. Could we have a motion on this, please? Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Post, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to start by saying thank you to town staff for bringing this forward. This has been an ongoing discussion since very, very early in our council term. Some of these stop signs have been discussed since, kind of pre-election time. So I'm really pleased to see that they are here to be implemented and to be talked about today. Before we do vote, I would potentially ask for council to maybe split these votes up. So there were 4 stop signs that were proposed. I see that 2 are being recommended by town staff. I'd really like to see us vote on all 4 and have some discussion about all 4 of them that were initially included in the report. So the other 2 that were not included in the recommendation was the one along Alder and then the one at Meadow and Passmore Pheasant area. So that would be my wish of council, is that if we could discuss all 4 of those separately, that would be great.
All right, Councillor Post. Do we have a seconder to break that up? Councillor Andrews, okay. Councillor Peters and then Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Go ahead, Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sort of a 2-part question for Mr. Koselak, either one. Probably Gary, based on the report. But first, could you speak to how many of the 4 conditions are typically met before you sort of execute, or is that sort of a judgment call? And then secondly, I thought the report might have a little bit more on the potential for PXOs as an alternative to stop signs. We had discussed that at one point, because I think we were looking at an overall analysis on whether this was a car problem or a pedestrian problem or both, and obviously which neighborhood and which intersection we're talking about.
Mr. Koselleck.
Yeah, through your worship, good question. So I'll start with the PXOs. The one of the reasons why I talked to Mr. Lackey and we want to bring the report back on sort of the policy is also to bring back a report that talks about policies for the implementation of PXOs. As I think we've said before, in my mind, it's much safer to have a consistent approach to implementing them. And there is variability within the Ontario Traffic Manual in terms of how and where you put them. So we want to bring that back to council specifically and get direction on a consistent approach across town. These intersections were looked at them based on the warrants. They didn't meet the requirements for a PXO. There wasn't the pedestrian volumes to put them in at these locations. The two intersections where the stop signs were recommended were close to warrants, but for an all-way stop, not a pedestrian crossover. To the first question, in terms of the warrants, so there's really four. I think Mr. Lackey tried to summarize it in the report, and it's kind of a little bit odd. I can go through them. So typically the first two in the report, one is a total volume warrant. It talks about how much traffic is approaching the intersection. And it was changed when the Ontario Traffic Manual was updated last year. It used to use higher numbers, and that's why we're going to find now that there's actually going to be some intersections that didn't meet warrants in the past that do. So the two warrants that are supposed to be looked at together, one is total volume, and that's depending on whether it's a collector or not, 250 cars in the peak hours. And the other is a volume split. And the idea of the volume split warrant, if you get into sort of the rationale in the Ontario Traffic Manual, is that you want to avoid putting stop signs on streets like I don't know, say Broadway at Gifford Street as an extreme example. It meets the total volume warrant, no problem, but you wouldn't put a stop sign there for the few cars that are coming out. And the way it was developed is to try and use that rationale that you're not going to disrupt the flow of traffic unnecessarily for very few cars. So the idea is that you look at the two warrants, those two warrants together. The accident warrant can be looked at individually. So if you have an intersection that has a lot of recurring accidents, the idea is that you look at the rationale why. It may be a stop sign helps. It may be some other treatment, better lighting, a signal. There's all kinds of different treatments. Some municipalities paint slow on the road, but it's looked at by itself. And then the sight distance one is really the intent in the manual is you don't want to put a stop sign, say after you go around a bend, and then all of a sudden there's a stop sign there. I mean, motorists don't have a chance to see it or know it's coming, and it actually creates a less safe circumstance. So the idea is, I guess it's a sight distance of 100 meters. The idea really is to give motorists a fair chance to stop before they reach the intersection. So again, it's looked at as a standalone warrant, but it's really a rationale not to put a stop sign in a certain location.
Right, thanks. So, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, just sort of closing thought on that. The trouble I had going through the report and looking at the different factors, it's stated more than once that stop signs were not intended to be used, solely for pedestrian access. So thus my question about the PXOs, we're barely at the counts in several spaces for total vehicles. Obviously there haven't been any major accidents at those intersections. So it seemed that a lot of the examples in the report could tip either way, I suppose. And I know there's arguments for Hanson opening up and that kind of thing, but again, if this was going to be primarily a pedestrian thing, then we should be, again, looking at pedestrian solutions, and the stop signs won't necessarily change behavior, but I know they're what people want. So anyway, those were some of the thoughts I was having, and I appreciate the detail you provided.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Peters and Mr. Koselleck. Deputy Mayor, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a thought while I was going through this. Councillor Taylor, he posted a Facebook post asking for comments in regards to stop signs. Well, I'd like to thank him personally for jamming up my inbox. I got a ton of them. And if we went by every recommendation that people wanted, we'd have stop signs at every single intersection in this town. At some point, we've got to rely on staff. We can't put stop signs everywhere. Everyone seems to want them, and between speed bumps and stop signs, it's certainly a mishmash of what people want. But one thing became evidently clear to me is people want stop signs, and whether it's to control speed, which stop signs aren't really there to control speed. And as you know, we recently went through a study, and there was a lot of good ideas there. I'd like to see some of those implemented instead of stop signs. I just don't think stop signs are always the way to go. As far as the environment, things like that, I just don't think they're necessarily the way to go. So I'd like council just to consider that in the future, that, you know, just because people want them doesn't mean they get them. But anyway, just a concern I had. Thank you.
Right. I'm in agreement, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Sherwood, and then Councillor Andrews.
Yes, Your Worship, I'm almost in total alignment with our Deputy Mayor McIntosh. You know, we certainly don't want the town polluted with stop signs, but I will never ever admit to being a traffic expert. I rely on the expertise that we have before us from the engineers and the professionals, and I'm going to take their recommendations into consideration, because that's what we've paid them to do. Could I please maybe, for my own sake, have a reminder that if and when we vote on this tonight, and even if they fail one of the four, did we not pass something that says this can't come back for 5 years?
We did.
Okay. That's just a reminder then that unless there's something like a development or something in a specific area that makes a significant change, but basically this will not come back to council for 5 years, depending on how we vote.
Well, those particular stop sign locations, that is correct. That is correct.
The four that we're going to be debating.
That's correct. Yeah. Okay. That's my understanding. Yeah. Councillor Andrews, and then Councillor Post.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. I know the touch points of stop signs and safety in our community is certainly paramount. And, you know, I too truly respect the work that has gone into this report and the data. And I'm typically a data-driven individual, make many of my decisions, in fact, probably 95% of my decisions based on data. But sometimes there are those exceptions. There are some anomalies. I know one of the locations here that is highlighted, I have been in that location several times where, in fact, because the fact that there is no stop sign, you know, near misses, and I don't know if it's a combination of education, if it's a combination of informing people how they should be driving and caring for their community. It could be a combination of things. And so, you know, I think that where I'm struggling is the fact that we have some anomalies, despite, you know, the volume split and having the warrant that identifies the number of vehicles that ended up going through on a specific day. But that's only a snapshot. It's only a snapshot at a specific day, specific time. I know it's highlighted in, you know, on one example, I guess the 21st of June. But there are those exceptions on the weekend or, you know, other times of the year where traffic patterns change and the volume of vehicles and maybe in a specific neighborhood also changes. So this is where I'm struggling, and I think that, you know, I had to express this because it is an important decision to make. And as Councillor Sherwood indicated, you know, once, you know, a decision is made, it doesn't get the opportunity to come back until, you know, 5 years later. So those things may also have to be, you know, looked at some point when those things can be, in fact, stop sign consideration can be brought back for discussion.
Well, you hit the nail on the head there, Councillor Andrews, regarding education. I think we need to do a better job about educating and reminding people about the rules of the road. You know, these people that are doing these things, running stop signs, these are residents of Orangeville who are doing this. And, you know, we're going to have to talk to our neighbors. We're going to have to make people aware of the proper rules of the road. OPP can't be everywhere. I know, you know, going forward, I'm sure they're going to be rotating through the town, and that's what we expect, and we hope that some of those lessons will be taught harshly to those who do those things. There's going to be some further discussion on automatic speed enforcement and red light cameras and this type of thing coming up, and maybe some of those harsh lessons will be delivered, you know, once we get some of that equipment installed, which I hope will happen in the coming months or years. Councillor Post, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for those comments, Councillor Andrews, because that was what I was going to highlight as well. Those were very similar comments to mine, is that myself, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Andrews, were all invited over to Meadow to speak with residents in that neighborhood who were having some significant concerns about the drivers in the area. And while we were standing for half an hour, 45 minutes on the side of the road, we bore witness to a lot of the issues that they were speaking of. Well, you know, I reached out to Mr. Koselak today because while I agree that the numbers show that there's no merit for a stop sign in that area, I'd love to hear an alternative option, because we did clearly see that there were issues in that area. What we don't want to do as council is to put a stop sign in unnecessarily that's going to cause more risk and to give pedestrians of that area a false sense of security where they won't have any. So in speaking with Mr. Koselak ×2 today, there were some really great suggestions made, and I'd like to turn it over to him if that's possible. And then I do have some additional comments to make, but I'd love for Mr. Koselak to have the opportunity to share some of the alternative ideas that could be made for the Meadow Drive area in particular as starting points.
Mr. Koselak.
Yeah, through your worship, happy to provide a bit of information. It's an interesting intersection because just looking at the nature of the road network, I would suggest that at least 90% of the traffic going through that intersection is local to that community.
It's a dead
and it's
end.
Different. It's very different than an intersection like College Avenue or Alder or Spencer, where you're getting a lot of through traffic. We talked about three potential things that the town could consider doing in a location like that. First one, we have some good news. So recall the discussion previously about the children playing signs. We had some trouble procuring them. The vendor was out of business, I understand. But we were able to source them from a different location. They've arrived, so they'll be, I think we're waiting for locates, and they'll be installed soon. And that's the sort of thing I think that may be effective there, or signage that just talks about that, you know, this is a local community, please drive slow. I've seen it in other areas. I think it's effective, at least it's a step in the right direction. And the other suggestion for an area like that, like I say, it's very isolated as to who's driving through there, is possibly we work with our new communications manager and develop some sort of written communications that we can hand deliver to that community with a message that's specific to that community. And my guess is that we can set the right tone that, you know, some of the offenders will actually listen. And the third is obviously increased OPP enforcement, which I understand Councillor Post has already spoken to the OPP about. So, you know, there's things that can be done in a targeted community where you don't have as much through traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Koselak.
Yeah, thank you for that. I thought those were great suggestions. And as we move forward with this discussion, I just wanted to give a bit of perspective on where my thought is landing right now. The 2 stop signs that were recommended by staff, I will be voting in favor of implementing. And when it comes to the one that was suggested on Alder, or was discussed for Alder, that one is almost so close to meeting the merits that what my concern is that when we approve the stop sign on Spencer, it's going to deter some more traffic over to Alder. And even though it doesn't quite meet the merits right now, I feel like it's very close. So I would like to vote in support of the stop sign being implemented on Alder as well. But when it comes to the stop sign on Meadow Drive, I think that we have an opportunity here to try a different route. And rather than implementing a stop sign, which I know is what the neighbors in that area wanted, I think we have an opportunity to do something perhaps perhaps more impactful that will really make that community a bit safer. And perhaps we start with the communication piece that was mentioned, as well as the addition of some of the other traffic calming measures that are new to our community. So that's kind of where my thoughts are landing right now. And I'm interested to hear the thoughts of the rest of council.
Thank you, Councillor Post. Got Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the discussion here today. This discussion is near and dear to my heart. It's been a long journey for sure. I really like where this is ending up. If I could, I'd like to pick up on what Councillor Post has said, and that is, if we are going to deal with these things as 4 separate ballots, I would appreciate it if we could have a recorded vote on each one. I think it's important for the citizens to know how each member voted on their area. And then second to that is, I'm aligned with that thinking. I think that's really good. I thank Councillor Post and Mr. Koselak for your thoughts. Meadow, I hate to give up the fight, but it doesn't sound like we're going to come to an agreement here today. So if the next best thing is that we increase our safety protocols in that area and have an added force there, I think that would be great. The piece that I'm very concerned about is it's back over to the west end. And again, I'm so pleased to see that College and Spencer are looking like they're going to achieve some sort of alignment here today. But to not include Alder with Spencer, and it's the same comment as Councillor Post, you are literally pushing the problem up to another end of that area. And I can tell you, I'm plugged in that area. That's why I put out those posts, Deputy Mayors, because I wanted the people to respond to all of council so you could see what I see. And that is, there's people down there that are pleading with us to do something. And this is our opportunity. We can't forget the folks on Alder in this decision-making process. So I just want to be upfront as well. I will be voting for the 3, and I will be voting for the safety measures on Meadow that Mr. Koselak has put forward. And I certainly do appreciate everyone's input here tonight. Good discussion.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I agree with the comments that have been made. This has been a robust discussion and opportunity to hear different perspectives. Mr. Koselak, I really appreciate your recommendations and suggestions, especially for the area that Councillor Post and Councillor Taylor have highlighted. As an example, you talk about signs that advise people to slow down, and I know the mayor highlighted a reference to my comment about education, and I know that from a communications perspective, hopefully we can get the message across. Would you know of the initiative that is on Diane Drive? Is that a resident initiative where there are a number of signs requesting people to slow down? We know that there's parking on either side, and Diane Drive at the best of times can be difficult to navigate through, but just seen recently in the last, I think it must be last 2 weeks or so, signs that have gone up. Would you know if that is a community initiative where some neighbors have just kind of got together, cobbled some funds and have the signs made? Is that what has occurred there?
Mr. Koselak.
Through you, Your Worship, I haven't seen those signs, but I have seen other signs going up throughout in different locations, and CAA was giving out some. They almost look like an election sign, that size that people are putting on their lawns in various communities, and it has that sort of messaging. Please drive slowly, that sort of thing. So that stuff's out there. Really, the suggestion was to do something a little more municipally, but
yes.
But there are, I believe they were CAA signs that were going up in other communities, and I'm sure I've seen a few in Orangeville as well. I don't know if they cost anything or if residents pick them up for free, but it certainly sends a message too. They're just perhaps not as impactful as something that municipality might be able to put out.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree that if it happens to be just a grassroots initiative, it certainly is making a statement, and it is requiring those to slow down. And hopefully the communications plan, if one is put into place, no doubt for the area that we've referenced, which is Meadow and Pheasant, I'm hoping that will end up appeasing the residents of that community and support their safety concerns too as well.
Your worship, if I could share my screen, one of our staff sent me a picture of one. Perhaps with your indulgence, you could tell me if that's what you were seeing. Yeah. You see that?
It's similar, but the graphic doesn't include the CAA logo on it, so it must be just a neighborhood initiative.
Okay. Yeah, these are the ones I've seen, but it's everything's a help, right? In terms of calming traffic throughout the neighborhood.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
All right, Councillor Sherwood and then Councillor McIntosh.
The deputy mayor was before me. Go ahead.
Okay, my apologies. Deputy Mayor, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Worship. You're forgiven. I just wanted to go on record as saying, like, if we are going to put them on Spencer, which it looks like, I certainly support Alder Street as well, because we'll be back here in a month or 2 months with the citizens complaining that the traffic's doubled on that street. So I absolutely support that initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Mr. G. Koselak. Do you know by chance if the intersections at Pheasant Drive and Passmore have ever had the sign that flashes how fast you're going? Has that ever been deployed over there in that area? And if not, that's something I was kind of hoping we could add into the recommendation, but do you know offhand if that's ever been put over there?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't know, but I don't believe it has. It is something I talked to Mr. Lackey about earlier today, and he's in agreement that those signs could be deployed in that location. It might be a good awareness for the community. So it's on staff's radar as well. If you want to put it in the recommendation, that's fine, but it's already on our radar, and Mr. Lackey is aware of it.
Okay, I do appreciate that. I think just to to strengthen it up, I would like to put that in the recommendation if we could, Your Worship. That that area, Pheasant Drive, Passmore, and Meadow, have the flashing sign deployed there, and not just for a couple of days, for a significant length of time.
Okay, where exactly are you talking about?
Well, I'll leave that up to staff.
Okay. All right. Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Post. Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry, we already have an amendment on the floor that council needs to vote on first, being separating out the approval of the particular intersections from the motion. And then we can move on to the additional amendment if that's all right.
All right. Thank you for that clarity. Appreciate that. Okay, Councillor, we ended our discussion at this point. We can now move to vote. Okay. So first item on the agenda is voting on Councillor Post's amendment. That is to separate this into 4 separate votes. Councillor Taylor has asked for this to be recorded. Can we have, let's just call the vote on that. All in favor of that amendment? Very good. Secondly, we have Councillor Sherwood's suggestion of adding this temporary radar speed sign into that area for a period of time to be determined and a location to be determined by staff. Councillor Post, you wanted to weigh in on this?
Yeah, perhaps we could just change the wording of that to include the other measures that Mr. Koselak had talked about as well, including the communication plan and the other traffic calming measures, as well as the speed sign. If we could include all kind of 3 of those additional measures into the stop sign on Meadow Drive, that area, that would be great.
Very good. Councillor Sherwood, you amenable to that?
Right, in lieu of a stop sign at Meadow.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got Councillor Sherwood making that amendment. I guess it's a three-parter. Councillor Post is seconding that, correct, Councillor Post? All right, all in favor of that amendment? Very good. Okay, let's move on to the items. Let's go with College and Fieldgate. This is a location of a stop sign. All in favor?
Do we need each one moved?
I'm
and
sorry.
seconded?
I'm sorry. It's a call. Yes, this is a vote to be called by the clerk. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if we could if you'll just indulge me for 1 second, if we could just go back to receiving the actual report and then as well approving the update to the new always stop policy. I have a mover and a seconder as Deputy Mayor McIntosh and Councillor Sherwood. And then happily I can go through each of the intersections.
All right, all in favor? Very good. Okay, recorded vote on College and Fieldgate. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
That council pass a bylaw to implement an always stop at the intersection of College Avenue and Fieldgate Drive. You need a mover and a seconder.
Councillor Taylor, Councillor Post. And Councillor Taylor has asked for a recorded vote, Madam Clerk.
Okay, Councillor Sherwood,
Yes.
Councillor Andrews,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh,
Yes.
Councillor Peters,
Yes.
Councillor Post,
Yes.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes.
Moving
Vote is
on.
carried.
Moving on to the next location, and that council pass a bylaw to implement an always stop at the intersection of Spencer Avenue and Cornwall Gate. We have a mover and a seconder on that, please. Got Taylor and Post again. Madam Clerk.
Okay, Councillor Andrews,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh,
Yes.
Councillor Peters,
Yes.
Councillor Post,
Yes.
Councillor Sherwood,
Yes.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes.
Vote is carried.
All right. Moving on to the next item, and that council pass a bylaw to implement an always stop at the intersection of Alder and, can somebody fill me in on that?
Sherwood?
Is it Sherwood? Yes, confirming that.
The report notes Alder Street and Glengarry Road or Alder Street and Sherwood Street.
I'm partial to Sherwood, but
Mr. Koselleck.
Your Worship, if I could, Sherwood, looking at the traffic counts that have been done in the past, is the busier of the two intersections. So if there was going to be one selected and one would be appropriate, I would suggest Sherwood would be the more appropriate. The other comment, maybe just to make it a little easier, in light of the fact, normally what we do is implement the one, then revisit the Alder Street intersection later if traffic patterns change. But in light of the intersection not being revisited for 5 years, I think the logic behind considering this now is appropriate.
Right. Okay, so we have Alder and Sherwood being the recommendation. Councillor McIntosh, did you want to make a comment, or you?
I was going to make the motion.
Okay, motion by Deputy Mayor on that, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Madam Clerk, recorded vote, please.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh,
Yes.
Councillor Peters,
Yes.
Councillor Post,
Yes.
Councillor Sherwood,
yes.
Councillor Taylor,
Yes.
Councillor Andrews,
And yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes. All right, and moving on to the last item, and this was the motion by Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Post, on a number of recommendations for the Meadow and Pheasant intersection. As previously discussed, they were to include radar sign implementation for some period of time to be determined by staff, and also some written communication to the neighborhood. Councillor Post, maybe you can help me. What was the third item?
We had the speed deployment, the signs, the children in play signs, and then the communication, as well as, of course, OPP enforcement. But that one doesn't need to be included in this motion.
Very good. Okay, so that's the motion. And Madam Clerk, recorded vote, please.
Sorry, I was just looking for my my mic. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes.
Councillor Andrews.
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yes.
Councillor Peters.
Yes.
Councillor Post.
Yes.
That motion's carried.
All right, thank you, Council. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving on to correspondence now. I guess we should also, name some of these folks that are on this correspondence. We have the Layman's who sent in correspondence on College and Fieldgate stop sign. And then we have Jolene Sir, Debbie Van Wyck, Rob Long, Ron Work, Harry Bell, Andrea, and Jason Norwood, who also sent in correspondence on the Spencer and Sherwood and Alder and Sherwood stop sign. So thank you to those residents who sent in their comments and support of Council's decision tonight. We've got a number of other pieces of correspondence, 13.1 through 13.15. Can we have a motion to receive this correspondence, please? Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Taylor. Any further comments on these correspondence? Councillor Andrews, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I had a great interest in reading a couple of the correspondence pieces, one of which came from the County of Dufferin and the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. And also the second one, which I also found intriguing, which is the Grand Valley expansion plans. And I know that we have a couple of members of Orangeville Council who sit at the county table. And I'm not sure if you can comment, or maybe someone from staff might be able to comment, but I found it interesting that the decision was made where the town of Grand Valley was not, I guess, in agreement with the opportunity for expansion. I'm not sure if that's something that we need to talk about here, but I just thought, again, it's one of those items that's sitting out there.
My understanding is they do want to expand their boundaries, Councillor Andrews.
Yes,
and
yes.
The problem is that the county sort of overrides a lot of these planning decisions, as we know here in Orangeville. The needs assessment that was done, land use assessment that was done as part of the municipal comprehensive use, suggested the boundaries of Grand Valley, Shelburne, and Orangeville should grow because of growth targets. The growth of the town of Shelburne and Grand Valley has been accelerated through Dufferin County Council motions, and they're going to be approved, I believe, their boundary expansions. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, did you have some further comment?
Yeah, I was just in agreement with you. I was going to say County Council approved their expansion.
All right.
So it looks like it will go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, there are some developers there, and of course, one of the things I learned going through our sewage treatment plant in Orangeville is the solution to pollution is dilution. Remember that comment, and
yes.
It's Grand Valley has the unusual and fortunate, the river coming through there, which has got a huge volume of water, which means that their sewage treatment plant actually can grow quite large, and they will be continuing to expand that sewage treatment plant, and because they've got such a large volume of water, they will be able to grow. We put our effluent from our sewage treatment plant into a very small tributary, and it's restricted. I think a lot of people feel that's a good thing. Otherwise, we would already be Milton or Newmarket, with the kind of expansion that would be able to happen if we had unlimited water and sewer capacity. So it's a good thing. I think we like the slow and steady growth of Orangeville. Grand Valley and Shelburne have been growing by leaps and bounds, and I hope they're able to handle those growth because it brings additional expense and some problems sometimes. So, but good luck with them both. I don't know, Deputy Mayor McIntosh and I both voted in favor of letting them do what they wish within their boundaries and expand their urban boundaries. Okay, thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Andrews. Yeah. All right. Any further comments on any of this correspondence before we vote on receiving? No. Okay. All in favor of receiving? Thank you. Moving on to committee and board.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, to interject. That motion also was to include the proclamation of Lung Cancer Awareness Month, if council is amenable to including that as well.
Okay, my apologies. Yes, proclamation for, oh, I'm sorry, what one was that, Madam Clerk? Lung cancer awareness?
Yes, under 13.1. It's just that proclamation.
Right,
request.
So, yeah. Okay, so we need to deal with that on a separate vote, do we, Madam Clerk?
Yeah, that would clean things up, yes.
Okay,
thank you.
So we have a proclamation request for Lung Cancer Awareness Month. Could we have a motion to approve this proclamation? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, Councillor Peters seconded. All in favor? Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Council. Moving on to item 14, we have committee and board minutes. A recommendation that these minutes of the following meetings be received. Cultural Plan Task Force minutes of June the 22nd. Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee meetings of June the 3rd. Official Plan Steering Committee minutes of June the 9th. And Sustainable Orangeville Committee minutes of June the 7th. We have a motion to receive these minutes, please. Councillor Post, second by Councillor Andrews. Any comments? All in favor? Thank you, councillors. All right, moving on to 15, notice of motion prior to meeting. So as many members of the public and of course council is aware, the Kin Club sent a letter through a few weeks ago with unfortunate news that they would be unable to host and organize the Santa Claus Parade, which has been a staple here in Orangeville for many, many decades. So I, was talking with staff and have talked with some of our council about this. This is an iconic kind of event that we have here in Orangeville. I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that it happens. In conversation with Sharon Doherty of our Parks and Recreation Department, and who has been in touch with the president of the Kin Club, Angela Lockhurst, and another past president, Cindy Williams, who have been integral in running these events in the past. And we've received a lot of the information on how the parade was put together, the organization of it. Some of the recommendations were such as using our crossing guards and paying them on Saturday. I actually had a brief sidebar with Darla Fraser, our CEO of our library board, who's now looking after our crossing guards. It seemed like a very good suggestion. Crossing guards have safety vests, they have winter clothing, they understand traffic issues and are already trained as such and would be able to. So that's part of the reason to ask for money, because paying the 20 or 30 crossing guards is an important part of this solution here. So that's just some of the background. But let me read this. It's whereas the Santa Claus Parade has been an institution enjoyed by children and adults of Orangeville and surrounding area for decades, and whereas the Kin Club has announced that they do not have the resources to organize and hold the event in 2022, and whereas the town has an opportunity to continue their tradition of a Santa Claus parade in Orangeville. Therefore, be it resolved, the Town Council approves the town hosting a Santa Claus parade on November 19th. Community services staff will be organizing the Santa Claus parade with volunteers, and I would hope some council members might be interested. We certainly are going to look for members of the public to help out as well, and that funding in the amount of $15,000 from Parks and Recreation Reserve be used to cover the associated costs. So could we have a seconder to this motion, please? We'll have a discussion. Got Councillor Sherwood, and then we've got Councillor McIntosh, and then Councillor Taylor. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. My apologies.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question. Is the Kin Club still willing to help out in this, or have they basically said that
they have been, but their numbers and you know, service clubs all over the world have been hit hard by the pandemic. There's been a lot of clubs actually folded. And I know some of the clubs here in Orangeville have lost members as well. So they have been very cooperative. Ms. Lockhurst has volunteered to help. And Ms. Doherty, you're on the call. Sharon Doherty, can you weigh in here on your conversations with the Kin Club?
Yes, good evening, Mayor Brown, members of council. Yes, Ms. Lockhurst and I have been communicating the last couple of weeks, and some of the points that she indicated that the Kin Club would be able to help with is the Santa float. They do have that in storage at one of our parks locations, as well as securing, you know, the big chief himself to come down from the North Pole. And she's also willing to help with the judges booth, and I believe the prizes associated with that judges booth.
Excellent. Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear they'll continue their association, but you know, we need to pony up the resources and some additional help and make this happen. Councillor Post and then Councillor Taylor. Councillor Post, go ahead.
Councillor Taylor, go ahead. You were ahead of me.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Taylor, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Post and your worship. I don't know that my comments are helpful. So first of all, I'm supportive of the initiative, and thank you to Ms. Doherty and to you, Mayor Brown, for bringing this forward. The piece that's concerning is volunteerism overall. So, you know, I speak as a member of the Optimist Club, and certainly, you know, numbers are down as your worship has shared. I was a volunteer at the Rib Fest this year, and same thing there. The Rotarians had difficulty potentially even putting it on because there wasn't enough people. So I think longer term, it's something for us all as citizens to think about. And if there was a message here tonight, it's get involved in your town, because these events are precarious at best. We know them and love them and want to participate in them, but they rely on people to volunteer to bring them forward. So I guess my concern, and it's not directed at you, Mayor Brown, or it's more of a council comment, and I think we should have a discussion, is what's going to happen after 2022? Like in 2023, I can tell you there's going to be no changes. The Kinsmen will still have difficulty. And again, this isn't about the Kinsmen. We'll just call it service clubs in general. We'll still have difficulty. So in 2023, you know, we're going to be at a tipping point about whether or not we have the event. It sounds like if we do this, it's going to be a town event. There won't be any going back. So again, I support the initiative. I just think from long-term planning, we all need to kind of hold hands and agree that this is probably where we're going and what's going to happen as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Well, 2023, I don't think there's going to be a tipping point, Councillor Taylor. I think we'll carry on in 2023. I think this is an iconic event that will not be canceled. I think it'll
carry on, your worship. That was my point. Is who's going to organize it? Who's going to do it? Will it be volunteers or the town, right? So the tipping point is it's going to a taxpayer funded event, and some of these other ones might as well. So that's what we need to talk about and be aware of.
Hey, Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm in full support of this at this time. I know that under the leadership of Sharon Doherty, she will definitely have things aligned properly. One train of thought is that, there may be a point in time where, and I know the challenges exist as has been highlighted with service clubs, but we potentially have an opportunity with secondary school students who require community hours, not to put some additional responsibility onto Ms. Doherty, but that's where you get some of the new volunteerism to hopefully cultivate volunteerism from a lifelong commitment. And maybe we can, work in collaboration with the two area secondary schools to hopefully garner some interest in supporting this. And it might be just another way of helping a very important event in our community.
Thank you. Mr. Osmond, I see you've weighed in here, sir. Did you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I would like to make a comment because first off, everybody is really tuned in because in actual fact, volunteerism in this country, certainly globally, is a real big issue, and there's no surprise it's happening here in Orangeville. Just want to bring up the topic again because the volunteerism issue is one that's been covered in the Recreation Parks Master Plan, and Manager Doherty is actually spot on. The actual fact is, the recreation events, one of the mandates is to take a close look at what we're doing with volunteerism going forward. And I like to think that we're looking at Santa Claus Parade as one big event right now and keeping it going in 22. Discussion with Manager Doherty today, and what we want to do is look at how do we get volunteers more engaged going forward, how do we recruit volunteers, how do we retain volunteers. It's a more bigger question, if you would, and I think that the Department of Community Services is certainly up on this one, and we will be doing a complete review of how we can get volunteers more engaged. I think it's a really, really big concern going forward, not just for Santa Claus Parade, for as Councillor Taylor just alluded to, Rotary had the same issue, Optus Club's got the same issue, Cadets Club right now is basically under their last legs here in terms of trying to survive, and on it goes. And I think it's not just for those charitable organizations, it's also for organizations like minor hockey, soccer, all these types of groups all have challenges with volunteers. And it's a bigger issue for the municipality and other municipalities, but it's one we're taking a close look at. And I think you'll see something coming back in the budget process to how we want to approach volunteerism going forward. Just a quick overview on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Osmond. Councillor Sherwood, go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship. Mr. Osmond just kind of touched on where my thought process is. I think, service clubs and volunteers, they're very difficult to come by now and rely on them. So I can see this maybe possibly being an event that will have to be fully paid for by, in a budget process where we would have to actually pay community service employees along with the crossing guards. You mentioned about paying the crossing guards, but I think we could bring on some community service, like whether that be some of the facility part-timers or, aquatic staff. And I think in going forward, and this is going to have to be a budgeted item where we're going to be paying staff to assist on this event.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood. All right, councillors, if there's no further comment here, I'll call a vote. All in favor of this? Thank you, councillors. Moving on to 16, any notices of motion at the meeting? Seeing none. Anybody have any new business? Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. We were talking about our Parks and Recreation Department. Just a plug for the event coming up. I guess it's the 17th of August, which is Movie Under the Stars over the Lions Sports Pad. And again, I know that Ms. Doherty and her team have put this together with an alternative, weather date. If the 17th doesn't work out, is on the 24th. And the other is, again, just a congratulations to the Orangeville Food Bank on their 30th anniversary recognition event today with a number of dignitaries and individuals who are recognized. I was taken back by not only the recognition for those that were long-standing volunteers. Here we're talking about service clubs. There they have, was it 150, 165 volunteers for an organization that has really supported thousands of people in our community over 30 years. And it was just a nice event to see the impact that that organization has in our community. That's all I have at this point.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, I just wanted to remind the community of an event that is returned after a few years hiatus, and that's the Taste of Orangeville will be happening on Mill Street on August 20th from 11 to 4. Good opportunity to come and get some little bits and snippets of all of our great culinary cuisines throughout town. So hopefully we'll see all of council and as many of the public as possible join that event.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor. All right, question period. Mr. Bonato, do you know if there's anybody online?
Through you, Your Worship, there is currently nobody on the line.
Very much. And then can we have a motion on the bylaws 19.1 through 19.5? Could we have a motion on those bylaws? Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? And a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Taylor, second by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Take care.